Hello, everyone. Today, we are going to talk about how you can prepare for your interview and what are some of the frequently asked questions in a job interview. So, today, we are going to be focusing more on what is usually asked from a CA when they go for job profiles like finance, controllership, and management trainee roles. So, what we'll be discussing in the videos are the following types of questions that are usually asked in such interviews. So, these are the questions that I'll be covering in the video: the HR questions, articleship related questions, accounting, and then I'll be discussing the CA final subjects, so like what all you need to specifically study in each subject, and then the must do topics. So, first, touching upon the HR questions, which are usually asked in every possible interview that you'll ever have. So you need to be very well prepared with these set of questions. And by prepared, I do not mean that write everything down, but also I do not mean that take them for granted that you'll be able to answer everything on the day of the interview. At least frame a broad answer in your head or write down few pointers. That always helps. So these are some of the commonly asked HR questions, and I've also included some of the questions that are asked specifically from a chartered accountant. So the first question that is always asked in an interview in some form or the other is, tell me something about yourself. So be very well prepared with this question and don't just mention everything that is written on your CV. Try and support everything with more and more examples, make it more qualitative, support it with various facts, quantitative facts also. Then strengths and weakness, then your biggest achievement, something that you think is your biggest achievement. So it is a very psychological question as to what you think, what you consider as an achievement basically. And it also highlights, so just make sure that this is from a very recent time and not from a time long ago, because it just highlights that you've maybe not achieved anything in recent times. Then your most challenging moment. So whenever any negative type of question is asked, don't just mention that negative aspect. Try and also support it with what you did in that particular situation to come out of it in a positive manner. So you can mention a challenging moment, maybe from your articleship period, that you had a conflict with someone or there was a tussle between the team members, and this is what you did to solve it. So always mention this part. Then their why questions are very important, like why did you do CA, why this particular job, why this particular role, and why our company. So these are the questions you should be prepared with. Why should we hire you? Why not a CA firm? So this was a question which was asked from me also, that instead of asking that why do you want to join our company, they asked, why don't you want to stay with the company you did your articleship, or why don't you want to join a CA firm, then something not on your CV. So these are some of the very common questions that are usually asked, and you should be prepared with them. Then coming to the articleship related questions. The first is, how was your articleship experience like? So in this, mention all the aspects, like what are the technical qualities you developed, what is the work that you did, what are the leadership qualities you developed, the teamwork that you did, or any soft skills that you developed. So touch upon every aspect in this particular question. Then you need to have very in-depth knowledge about all the areas you did in your articleship, especially if you did audit. I can talk about that because I did my articleship in audit. So you need to have very in-depth knowledge about, let's say, each area of the financial statement. For example, how would you audit PPE, or how would you audit revenue, expenses, finance costs? So be very well prepared with that answer and try and relate what you did practically to what you have learned theoretically for your exams. That'll get you brownie points if you mention some Indias or like some essays or something. Then something for which you were appreciated, a suggestion which was not accepted. So a suggestion which you gave to your manager, let's say, or supervisor, and which was not accepted. So the reason why that was not accepted, and how did you take it when someone did not, just accept what you were saying. Then team conflicts. Were you ever in a situation where there was a conflict or a tussle in the team? How did you get out? How did you get out of it? Then interesting things you learned. So this is the question that will be asked a lot from you during your interview, and they'll more often than not ask you what else did you do in an articleship. They'll keep asking you that over and over again during the interview, and they'll pick up a question from what you say only, so that you don't have that escape that I didn't do this in my articleship. So first they'll make you say what you did in your articleship, and then make subsequent questions basis what you said. and they'll keep doing it throughout the interview. So this has happened with me a lot. So the most important aspect that'll be asked in your interview is from your articleship experience only. Does not matter in which field you did your articleship from, because they know you won't have much experience or much knowledge about the profile they are offering you. But if you have good knowledge or good hold over what you did in the 3 years of your articleship, then it gives an impression to them that at least you know what you're doing, and if taught, you can do whatever work they'll give you to. Then moving to the accounting questions. So a lot of the times you will be asked various journal entries, like for the most commonly asked entries are regarding bad debts, reversal of bad debts, provision entries, depreciation, entries involving GST, TDS, and credit sales. They'll probably give you a question wherein you made the payment involving both GST and you also deducted TDS. So be prepared with those kind of entries. And the three golden rules of accounting, and then deferred and unbilled revenue is also very important. Try and understanding both the concept and also how you deal with them and where are they shown in the financial statements. Then prepaid and outstanding expenses, similarly accrued income. So all these kind of things you should know both the meaning as well as the accounting treatment. Then amendments in schedule 3, very important. So during our attempt, like when I had my placement drive, then there were few amendments in schedule 3. So they were asked in most of the interviews also. Then the accounting equations, and then the bank reconciliation statement is also sometimes asked in most of the exams, like the test that they do. And they may also, give you a question with data and everything that prepare a bank reconciliation statement. Then coming to subject-wise questions that are usually asked and what you need to prepare for specifically from your CA final subjects if you don't have time to go through the entire syllabus. So the first is financial reporting and probably the most important subject of it all. So a lot of questions are asked from this only, and basis also what you did in your articleship. So they'll ask you, many of the times they'll ask you what you did in your articleship, and you have to try and relate it to India's knowledge and everything. So especially whatever you've done in your articleship period, let's say you did something pertaining to employee benefits or revenue or business combinations or something like that. Be very very thorough with that India specifically, because that will be asked, because when they'll ask you about the articleship experience, what you did in your articleship, and you say, let's say more often, so I worked on business combination and leases, that were very peculiar things that I worked on. So I used to highlight that during my interview. So more often my second question would come in, they'll give me a situation about business combination, that how will you apply it in that case, or about leases. So be very very thorough with the Indias you have worked with during your articleship. Then one says leases again is very important, and what is the change in the treatment of leases? So the previous Indias versus the new Indias, what are the changes and what was the need to have the new Indias? What were the shortcomings in the previous Indias basically? Then India is 36. So in my interview also they asked me about impairment, how do we impair an asset, and they asked about goodwill impairment also. They also asked me a question about goodwill valuation, how would you actually value goodwill? Then ESOP valuation and treatment was also another question that was asked for me. Then India's 103 and 110, you should at least know the definitions and everything. They can ask you the business definition. They always used to ask me because, again, I used to mention business combination in my articleship experience. Then 115 is very, very important and is mostly asked in almost all the interviews. They ask you about revenue because that is what is most interesting to them. And so in revenue, you need to know the 5-step model of revenue recognition, like how do you recognize revenue and how do you account for it. So here also they link the unbilled revenue and the deferred revenue part. Then you also need to know the differences between India's 115 and the AS9, and the recent amendments also in this particular AS, and what all changed in this India's is very very important. Then India's 109 financial instruments, you need to know the definitions and also maybe the treatment, like what are the business models of treating this, and why are we having these different business models. And India's 24 related party transactions. So this is a very unusual AS to be asked in an interview, but it was asked from me. So they asked me what is related party, what is a related party transaction, is there a restriction, what if two companies have a common KMP, will they both the companies be related party to each other. So it was basic, but yeah, you should go through it. Then gap, like what is gap as a concept, like what are generally accepted accounting principles, and then why do different companies have different still have different gaps. And then they might ask you, why were India as introduced after all, and what is the difference between India as and AS. Then coming to our next subject, SFM. So again, it is not very important if you're not going for a core finance profile kind of an interview. However, some basic questions might still be asked. So one is you should know about the valuation models. What are the various valuation models, especially about DCF, that is a discounted cash flow, and what is the discounted that will be using in that case. Then the EV EBITDA multiple, what is it all about, and what does it tell you? What is an ideal number? Is it higher the better or lower the better? Then market rate of return, how do you actually compute it in real life? Then the types of derivatives, what is derivatives, types of derivatives, what is arbitrage, and then also an understanding of mutual funds, because I learned investing after my exams before the results, so I used to tell that also. They asked me a lot of questions. How do you evaluate mutual funds? What are the factors that you considered by comparing different mutual funds? And what is PE ratio? Again, very important. And then IRR. What is IRR and how do you calculate it? Then coming to audit, again, it is very important, especially if you've done your articleship in audit. But they won't just straight away ask you that, tell me this essay or tell me this section. They will more often than not related to something that you did in your articleship, as I said earlier. So you should be very thorough with the standards on audit. And then fraud reporting is something which is very often asked, especially in situational questions. So they'll give you a situation, for example, you came across something that is not legal, basically. You saw your senior or your manager doing it. What will you do in that particular situation? You have to again stick to your ethics. So ethics based questions are also asked a lot. Then company audit, you can go through it, although it is not very important, but sometimes a few questions may be asked. Then audit of areas of financial statement, that too you have to know, especially if you've done your articleship in audit, that how will you audit the different areas of the financial statement in detail. And also they may ask you about the materiality, how is it actually calculated, like practically. So these are some of the questions that may be asked from audit. Then coming to direct tax. So again, it is not very important for most of the job profiles unless you're specifically interviewing for a tax profile job. However, some basic questions might still be asked. And one is the type of ITRs that are there, the due dates of filing ITR, due dates of TDS, TCS returns, the slab rates that are currently there, deductions, residential status, and slum sale. Slum sale was asked from me in a business combination question when they were talking about 103. So they asked what will be the tax treatment of this particular transaction. So coming to the other subjects in SCMP, you should study all the models basically, and not the general theory or the benefits and limitations. But you should know about the model, especially if you're preparing for a consulting interview also. They are quite helpful that in that case. Then law is often not asked, and so there's probably no need to go through it also. But again, if you have time, then I would say don't miss anything. Then indirect tax, again, not very important, but some of the recent changes might be asked, which were introduced in the by the GST committee or in the budget. Then few things about GST are 9. These things might be asked. Then coming to our last segment, that is the must-do topics. So for whatever interview you're going, you should always know about the company, about the industry that company in, what are the recent trends in that industry. Then you should know about the profile you are interviewing for. And then about the Indian economy, you should be very well aware about the Indian economy, the inflation rate, the employment and the unemployment rate, the GDP growth rate, the repo rate, and what will be the repercussions if there's changes in any of them. Then about the budget, so mostly if you have given the November attempt, then around the time when you have your interviews, you'll have the budget out, and so you should know whatever is given in the budget. Then whatever is recent in news, and by news I mean business and financial news. Then mergers and acquisitions, recent mergers and acquisitions between company, any frauds that have occurred recently, you should know about. And then business models. So if you don't know business models about, obviously you would not know business models of all the businesses, but you should at least know the revenue model of the company you are interviewing for. because revenue is again asked a lot, so it is better to know their model. Then some of the other things are ratio analysis, very, very important. What are the four broad category of ratios and what all will you pick to compare two companies? So during comparative analysis of two companies, what all things will you keep in mind and how will you compare two companies? Then the company's annual report. So the company you're interviewing from, you should always go through their annual report. And there's this section called management discussion and analysis section, which gives you a broad highlight about, what basically it gives you a SWOT analysis also, and what all the company is forcing in the future for them, what are the opportunities and threats, what are the general trends. So it gives you a really good insight in about the company. Then sector specific news, again, you should go through the news. So if it's an automobile company, maybe go through what are the recent developments in the automobile industry sector. Like you should know about EVs and everything. What are the laws? What are the problems that they are facing? And then maybe also think of some solution because they might ask you that also. Then COVID impact on the economy, very, very important, and which is still very, very relevant. So you should not just know about. So this is one of the topic which might also be asked for your GDs if some companies have their GDs. And then Indian economy versus the world, where we are placed, and like what are the some of the schemes that you're very bullish about that they'll make a change in future. So these kind of questions you should be prepared for. Also, guys, one very important thing is know your CV inside out. So it is very, very important to know what order you've made your CV in. So if anyone tells you, walk us through your CV, then you should be able to do that in that particular order only. And they might ask you one random thing from your CV, and you should be able to back it up. So for every word that you have written in your CV, be sure that you are ready to explain it, and you can do that for even like 1 minute. So you can be ready to explain each and every word for like a minute. Be prepared with that explanation. So, yeah, that's it, guys. I hope you found the video helpful. If you have any queries, questions, or any suggestions for me, please feel free to reach out. Thank you so much. Please do like, share, and subscribe for more such videos.